Oh, you can explain.
Yeah, I'll pass this along. This bill is incurred, it's for paying for Signs by Tomorrow. And we had been in touch with the owners of Bog Iron Brewing, which you remember a couple weeks ago, you approved or endorsed an A&R for the property behind them. You split Miss Catherine Murphy's lot. Well, the plan was for them they wanted to look at purchasing that property, but they wanted to rezone it. But they didn't get their petition in. And, but the owners had been in touch with board members and the town manager. And when that time was coming up on the deadline, we reached out to him and asked him what's going on. He didn't realize he had to do it, so Mike had agreed to put a placeholder. You could see some backup material from the owner saying, yes, we want to go forward with it, let's go ahead. But when we do that, we become the owner of the application, so we had the costs. So I had started working with them, but we had to create the signs that get placed in the ground. And the day I was going to pick them up, which they were already produced, I get a call from them saying, we don't want to go forward with this now. So we still have the signs, but we did not put them in the ground since they're moving back on, or wanting to wait until the spring to do this. So that's, I guess, one positive thing in the last few years. We haven't fully spent our budget, and I don't expect we will. I mean, we'll have enough to cover it. But that's what that bill is all about.
Will those signs work if that bill is put forward in the future?
They will. The only thing that would have to change is the date and possibly the location, but everything else on it would be the same. We hope.
And do they plan to move forward with it?
They do.
Okay.
They do, but there's other things that's contingent on.
Okay, so we could potentially recycle them, is what?
Could reuse them, but we cannot charge Bog Iron for the signs since we became the owners of the of that application. But we can use it again and just change some information on it.
Okay, does anyone have any further questions? All right, would need a motion to approve these, or this one bill, to Signs by Tomorrow for $179.55.
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right.
Thanks.
Next up, we have two sets of minutes. One was from last week. We had some change, or, yeah, it was last week.
Yes.
We had changes that Orin brought to our attention. Did everyone get a chance to look these over?
Right, and thank you, Warren, for making those changes. And also, he made changes to the September 10th minutes.
Okay, so well, I should have been more clear, I'm sorry. We'll go with the August 20th
Right.
ones first. I just want to make sure, at least for Orin's part, if his changes were put in there correctly.
Yes, they were.
Good, okay. Was there anything further on these? Did we notice anything else? Okay. So then I'd hear a motion to approve the August 20th minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Oh, yeah, that's right. You know.
Yes.
Okay. So now we have the minutes for September 10th, just a short week ago. Does anyone have any corrections? Or additions, removals?
Yeah.
So these include,
Yeah, did you circulate the edits that I?
yes.
Oh, you did?
They were put up on Dropbox,
Okay,
so they were substituted out.
okay. Just some periods at the end of the first, we're at the public hearing, the first 48660, the end of the first paragraph, after the 13th should be a period, and after the later should be a period. That's it.
All right, anything else? Okay, hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion to approve the September 10th minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Oh. All right. So, we received a request to reconsider reopening the remand. Before we kind of get into a discussion about that, I've mentioned in the past at these meetings that I find it unacceptable for anyone to be dropping things off in our personal mailboxes. There are submission guidelines that need to be followed. Putting a stamp on it doesn't make it any better, in my opinion. I think it's improper, and to me, it's borderline intimidation. I'm not comfortable with it, and I don't think it should happen again. I think that, well, that's my opinion on it. I don't think that should happen any further, and anything that's mailed to me directly for this will not even be opened. It'll be given to town council. That's my personal opinion. I'm not speaking for the board, I think, on this, but I know we've all discussed it in the past, and frankly, there are ways to go about things correctly, and then ways to do it improperly. So, I guess I'll open up discussion to the board on your thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, just some clarification. I know we did a proposal, a procedure for applicants to provide their material at least a week before. What is our procedure relative to respondents and the population that may be affected, and what timing and when do we expect to receive stuff from them, and how should we receive it?
I believe that it's supposed to go through Paul. I think that's even written.
It is a policy.
correct. It's a
that you all
policy.
passed this year.
But as far as the 7 days, I think we did discuss the abutters could bring things sooner than that. We wouldn't hold them to the 7-day rule.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and from my perspective on this amounts to a rebuttal to the things that were already discussed at the public hearing. That and a couple things, you know, kind of trying to shift our discussion topics, which, again, I mean, that's in my personal opinion, is no place for anyone to tell us, you know, where we should be discussing things, where we shouldn't. You know, but I'm going to stop right here. I should apologize. I should have given Scott the chance to recuse.
Well, you didn't open this yet, right? Still talking policy?
I didn't officially open it. You're right. All right. Okay. So I will open. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable cutting me off. So.
Okay, no worries. Thanks, guys.
Okay. I don't know if I have to officially open you know, this request. But I would like the board to discuss it and get your thoughts on it and how you feel.
I'd just like to get town council's opinion as to what we should, at what stage or what conditions would allow us to do that in terms of reopening a hearing on a petition from somebody outside.
So the first hurdle that you need to decide is there new information being presented? So once there's new information, if you decide that there is new information being presented, a hearing can only be opened, in my opinion, a hearing can only be opened if it is within the time to act, and if you are considering new information, you have to open a new hearing, meaning it has to be advertised, there has to be abutter notices, just as you would any new hearing.
What happens to the timing of the decision after the close of a hearing, if you do that?
You only have the time to act, so you have, under the remand order, you have 90 days from when you closed, so you have until November 4th, is my calculation, which could be wrong. I counted the days on a calendar. Maybe I might be wrong, but that's what I have, is November 4th.
Not giving any merit to this particular petition, but just so for our own edification. So if someone came in with a petition with new information and we decided to open the hearing, what happens to the decision that was closed? Does that 90, do we have to reopen and have a new hearing within that 90 days?
Yes.
Or it's
Yes.
still, we're still within that 90-day window?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to be within the time to act.
Even if we were to reopen the hearing for new information?
Yes.
Okay.
Going back a little bit to the distribution of information, regardless of whether it's new or old or rehashed or whatever it is, I mean, I would recommend a policy that the board do not accept things at their personal homes mailed to them. Everything needs to be going through Paul, so I don't know if we have to add that to the rules, or if folks here feel the same way. I think that's, to me, that's a no-brainer, but I don't want to speak for you all.
I agree. I didn't even open the envelope because I knew the public hearing was closed, and from the return address, I kind of guessed what the letter was about, so I didn't even open it or read it for that reason.
Same.
And as far as, you know, with that said, we don't know if there's new information, you know, to be discussed, because the hearing is closed. So we can't review it, so we don't know if there's new information. So it's kind of a little bit of a catch-22.
Yeah, when I found out about it, I mean, my first question was to town council, can we even look at this? Is this something we can even look at? Because I had asked about potentially even going and looking at the site again as far as some of the board members who hadn't. And that was recommended, you know, we shouldn't be doing that because that would add, you know, new information. You know, to that point, that's why I thought we shouldn't even look at it. So I agree, yeah.
Well, you know, getting to the point where anticipating, just because you're getting a letter from somebody that it's going to be something specific to this particular hearing, I think pushes it a little bit. I mean,
Well, when I don't get a letter from that person ever in my entire life, and then this person who's been very vocal and very, you know, I'm not saying one way or the other against or for, hold on, against or for. I think assuming that it's not about, I mean, that's just silly, Orin. I mean, that's obviously it was something to do with this, and you know, I don't want to violate any type of law, any meeting law or anything like that by reading this information when I really shouldn't be. Just like I wouldn't receive anything from the applicant and read it after the hearing is closed. I mean, you're welcome to do what you like. I recommend against it, but that's my thought on it.
I mean, if we put it as a matter of policy, that's one thing. I think how we enforce it is challenging at best. We don't really have a whole lot of recourse other than to say what we said today and move on with our lives.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if it helps, the one time that recently that we had to open up a hearing that was closed was a zoning board, and they were considering a variance, and they were under the impression that wetlands were on a certain side of the property. They closed it, and then the conservation agent confirmed that the wetlands were actually on the other side of the lot. So that was a situation where it was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And they fixed the mistake and they went about their business. So that was one thing. And in that case, the applicant was willing and wanted it reopened because they wanted the record corrected.
Yes.
So,
Makes sense.
so it wasn't as if new information was offered by somebody. It was just somebody corrected a mistake that everybody was under the wrong.
Yeah, I mean, think of any public hearing, not just this one. You receive some information after it's closed by one party and not the other. If I'm the applicant at that point, I mean, if it was the other way around and the applicant had sent us something and we opened it and read it and it was not new information, but more of an argument for their case, the other party would be very upset about that. I mean, there's a reason there are rules in place as to how things are submitted, and I think this completely violated it.
Well, if the applicant had sent a similar letter, I would have done the same
Yeah.
thing, you know, so it's not. There's no favoritism or bias, it's just procedure. Yeah.
Anyone else thoughts on that? Then we can discuss reopening it, or the request to reopen.
I think we've exhausted that line of conversation,
Yeah.
so. I guess the question becomes to Paul, who you obviously received this memo, and Steve, I think you read it, and it's kind of part of your duties as the chair to determine what it was. If, I guess, do we have the ability to decide on the merits of this, if whether it being new information or not?
Please, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong. My interpretation of this is that we are, I mean, if there is new information and the board decides there is, then we can reopen it. My personal thought on this, and reading through it several times, is there isn't anything that's new. It's a rehashing of what was said, both in this past public hearing and the previous one. So I didn't see anything personally that was worth reopening it, or that was anything new.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm not the end-all be-all of this, so it's.
Well, the only thing that I would note, and I think it was already part of the public hearing, is the issue of whether or not there's a water resource protection district, and noting that their amended application as with their original fails to disclose that it is in a Zone 2, which is really the water protection district. And again, that was part of our hearing. I don't know that it deserves being reopened, and I think it certainly can be, if we wish it, to be part of our deliberations, because that was clearly discussed in
So
the public hearing.
you, right there, and I'm not picking on you, and I apologize, right there is exactly what I wanted to avoid by this being read, is that it's directing our discussion now, valid or not. I'm not saying one way or another whether you're right or not. I'm just saying that there's no new information in this. It was part of the public hearing. So now having this in our hands has now directed our discussion. It most likely would have gone there at some point anyways, because I believe we're going to talk about this quite a bit. But, right now, I would think we need to determine if there is anything new that would require us reopening this.
Is there anyone besides yourself that can try to make that determination?
It's part of the packet, so I believe it's information
You want
you've
us to read it?
received. Yeah, did you sent it
Yeah,
out?
I
to everybody?
forwarded this letter to you last week, and I had concurred with Amy that it was okay for you all to see this.
What letter is that?
Well, I made a copy of the letter dated,
September 10th, and there's a reference, an August 18th letter? Behind that. Paul, did you provide the August 19th letter as well, just the September 10th letter?
there were 4 letters provided
Okay.
in the email. I just made the request from last week in your packet today.
When did the email go out, Paul?
Wednesday.
I didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah, this is one has the balances. That's the one on the references.
I know I did receive it, Paul.
This August letter.
You
I did.
did, okay.
I did, I saw it, Paul.
Okay.
I did too.
I mean, again, not saying one way or the other, but, this could open up questioning our decision, whichever the decision is. Was it tainted by an abutter sending us information and recommendations and trying to steer our discussions? I mean, that's something we try to avoid. And if it was in my power to deny that, I would have denied even sending it to the board. I think, as it just proved, it steered the discussion already. And that, again, opens it up to, for anyone, whether we voted in or yes or no, either party can appeal it, so.
My thoughts are I didn't get a chance to read this. It was sent, obviously, it was sent to my address, but it went to my son's house. I haven't been home, so I haven't seen it other than scanning this now. But mechanically, let's speak in general terms, someone has to read it to see if, in fact, there is new information. Again, I haven't read this, I've scanned it. Obviously, the abutters have strong feelings on this, and as far as I'm concerned, this is a reiteration of virtually everything that we've spoken about. But getting back to process, at some point in time, we have to leave it to staff, in which case it's Paul, who, if there was something that we hadn't been aware of, then it ought to be considered, and under that consideration, whether we should reopen a hearing. I don't see anything new in here, but going forward, I think we leave it to Paul to review whatever is submitted after, and this is a rare occurrence. I don't know that it's happened since I've been on.
Right.
But leave it to staff to read what is purported to be new information. If it's new, then we've got to make a decision. Scanning this, I haven't read it verbatim. I don't see anything new. So I don't see any basis upon which we would reopen the hearing.
Yeah, and to address your point as well, when I initially got it, I had said to Paul and to speak with counsel, and they looked it over before I even read it. So, and I think, and again, Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the decision was to err on the side of caution and give it to the board. But if the decision was mine, it's like you said, it's everything that was in the public hearing, along with opinion. So I would not have brought it to the meeting today. But again, to err on the side of caution. And Amy, do you want to just reiterate? I mean, what you found in it? Is there anything that's new that wasn't in the public hearing?
In my opinion, everything's been covered in the public hearing, but this is why I asked for Paul to put this as a separate agenda item, because my opinion as to whether it's new or not doesn't necessarily matter. The board has to determine if there's something new.
Well, to move the process, I move that we reopen the hearing. I do that only to make a motion and have it voted down.
We have a motion to reopen the hearing. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Just for the minutes, I think the general perception is there is nothing new in the material that was submitted, so there, in my opinion, would be no basis to reopen the hearing.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of reopening the hearing? All opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, the hearing will not be reopened.
Mr. Chairman, so Paul, I'm sure I got this email. I was sick and traveling over the weekend, and my company computer does not accept our emails for some reason. It blocks them all. So unless I'm on my family computer, I can't even open up the the emails. So I apologize for that, but thanks for the hard copies.
Okay, this next will be a quick one.
Funny.
The remand for special permit 488. Again, the last time we opened this back up, I noted that I had no intention on holding a vote that night. The same thing is true tonight. I don't think that, I personally am not in a place to hold a vote yet, so we can have a discussion. I mean, unless folks here feel different. But I also don't think that we should be here for 5 hours discussing the same things over and over.
One of your handouts, just a one-pager. It's just a summary of the last few meetings when members have made comments about the conditions they would like to see. These were just taken direct or nearly directly from the minutes. So this is just to help you organize and see what had been talked about in terms of things related to conditions. Obviously, there's going to be, if you approve, there will be more, many more.
Did town council have a chance to check with Conservation Commission? I think there was a couple of things you said you were going to follow up on.
So they have there's a site visit tomorrow with DEP, so their decision is still in limbo. So the applicant has requested a superseding order of conditions, and prior to DEP issuing one, either affirming the Conservation Commission or overturning certain conditions that have been appealed, they do a site visit. So that's happening tomorrow. With regard to floodplain, if there is any construction in the floodplain, the Conservation Commission has said that they have to provide compensatory storage somewhere. So it was my impression, Paul, that they would allow construction within floodplain.
They would have to compensate, the applicant would have to provide compensation for any of that, because there was that portion of the inverters and I believe batteries that were showing on their maps being part of the floodplain.
The plan that they had submitted to Conservation did show the inverter in a different location. Is that correct?
We showed Jennifer the plan. I sent her the plan that we have.
Right.
Right.
I'm not certain, I'll trust you on that, Orin, I don't recall it, but.
That came out in testimony when we had an open
Sure,
hearing.
but, and their plan in front of you clearly shows that there's a portion of a floodplain being impacted by.
Right, but I'm just concerned that Conservation reviewed a different plan than we reviewed in terms of what their proposal was.
So if that, I did run that by. If that is the case, then they would have to go back to Conservation.
Okay. Then you mentioned a superseding order. Is that something the DEP issues, or is that something the applicant has asked?
No, the applicant asked for it from DEP. So under the Wetland Protection Act, when an order of conditions is issued, the first step of the appeal, if you don't like your order of conditions, the first thing you do is you apply to DEP for a request for a superseding order of conditions. And if that superseding order of conditions is issued and a party doesn't like that, whatever they issued, that's when you then appeal to OADR, the Office of Appeals and Dispute Resolution, for an administrative appeal. So even though it's common to say that they've appealed the order of conditions, they've really requested a superseding order of conditions. It's the same
And
thing.
typically, how soon after a site visit would that usually be?
Well, the DEP has 70 days from when they receive the request for superseding order, and they never file, they never act in time, in my experience.
So we may not get that back before we have to have a decision.
No, but I'm not, I don't think that would affect your decision at all, because if the inverters are in a different location, they do have, for Concom, then they would have to go back to Concom. So you would only be looking at what's in front of you. There are things that the Conservation Commission, because this is site plan, there are certain aspects of the Conservation Commission order that overlap with this planning board. Because it's site plan, you guys deal with stormwater and drainage. And the Conservation Commission, under the Mass DEP stormwater standards, they deal with stormwater also. So there are a few things that are going to overlap, but I would suggest that this board look at this from your planning board, from the site plan, from the zoning bylaw. And, hopefully for the applicant, it all falls into place, but like I said, they've requested a superseding order of conditions, so there's not much we can do. We just have to, at a local level, we have to look at this pursuant to the bylaw.
And you mentioned if the plan that Concom has is different than the one we have, then it would have to go back to Concom. It could also come back to us, correct?
If they change the plan.
Yeah, if they keep it.
Yeah,
from what
understood.
they
Yeah.
keep yeah.
Right, which happens, and would be
Yeah.
a site plan modification or
Yeah.
special permit.
Okay,
Depending on what they get.
okay. Yeah, so does that answer your questions about the conservation
Yeah.
So I don't know if I said it officially, but yeah, we're opening the discussion on the remand.
I believe in just reviewing some of the comments that they had issued in the superseding order, some of the ones were clearly objections in that they were identifying things they thought were within our jurisdiction and not those of conservation. Aside, there's a lot of things with dates and certain references which are something beyond our scope, but certainly there were things that they objected to, claiming that the decommissioning and things like that are really within our purview, and they were making comments on it, and those were a good number of their objections. And I think it's incumbent upon us to perhaps address those, and if in fact we want to make sure that they're taken up, we can adapt those ourselves.
Should we dive back into discussion?
We can get the
about-
ball rolling. Whoever has anything to say can start.
Yeah, yes. Trying to keep this focused on individual kind of aspects. I think what I've been thinking about the most is noise. I know, Joe, you put a lot of thought into what you were kind of discussing at the last meeting when this agenda item was up. I think read over the state's rules more than once, and I think that your position was that you want no discernible noise at the property line. I think there was discussion about whether the state rules would set a 10 decibel limit at the property line or at the nearest inhabited residence or structure. And looking back at the rules themselves, it's an and, not an or. So I think the property line is where we need to be looking at. And even though the applicant has suggested putting up a sound barrier, I think the efficacy of that sound barrier is something that would need to be looked at by the kind of acoustic engineer that we've talked about. So, because it's not encapsulating all of the inverters, it's essentially like an overgrown baseball backstop. So it's not a 360 encasement, it's just a wall that you can curve around with panels or whatever. So I think obviously where those panels are placed and how they surround the inverters has an effect on where the sound is absorbed and or not absorbed. So my feeling would be to kind of tie all this together is that I see it kind of as the sound study, whatever, in kind of 3 stages. One being sound engineer goes out, measures ambient noise, gets a baseline reading for the area. 2, looks at the equipment and the mitigation steps or panels or whatever the applicant is going to put there, and evaluates whether it will meet state guidelines in terms of noise levels, 10 decibels, and the state rules also talk about a pure tone noise level, which is where I'm going to stop pretending I know sound engineering. And because it doesn't make sense to do the baseline study, build the whole thing, and then see if you're actually hitting that level. And I'm sure that the applicant wouldn't want to build the whole thing, find out they're making too much noise, and have to tear the whole thing down, because that would be a terrible waste of time and effort and money and everything.
Not to cut you off, I just want to add to that as well, is I think the base study should be something done in winter as well, because without all the leaves and the brush, it's going to be, you could do it in the summer, and it'll muffle all the sound, so.
Yeah. So I think
Sorry.
so that would be and then if the engineer feels that this will meet state guidelines, then the applicant then that would be fine. And then they do the post-construction study to say, yes, this is what we predicted. And if not, then find a way to muffle it anymore. So that's how I see the structure of any kind of noise condition being made. I don't know if anybody else has any further thoughts on that.
My concern with the state guidelines is that I've not had a great deal of experience, I've had a little experience. The 10 decibels is problematic because it is a sound that is, even at 10 decibels, is annoying. And the regulations, I've read them, I haven't them memorized, but I think it does say 10 decibels to the nearest residence.
It says, and the property line.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Well, to the extent that, someone may interpret it to be the nearest residence, I don't see the fairness of getting away with allowing 10 decibels or higher because there's no residence there, and thereby the values on this property. As far as I'm concerned, the onus should be on, I don't know that I want to have the town, obviously would be a review fee that the applicant would pay, but town hire a consultant, design a system that may or may not comply with the 10 decibels or no sound at all, and take the onus off the applicant. The applicant, from my perspective, the applicant should be required to have no discernible sound at the property line above background. In order for the project to go online, he's going to need an electrical permit from the town to make the connection to the utilities. He can run the system up, not connect it to the utilities, and if it makes a sound that's discernible, guess what? The town doesn't give him the electrical permit to make the connection. That's part of the order conditions. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a special permit. I don't rely on 10 decibels that the state may or may not be able to enforce. To me, the only enforcement that I think we have is by placing it in the order conditions that the electrical inspector be instructed not to allow the utility connection until such time as he's met that condition.
I agree with how you want to enforce it as far as not having it connect. I'm still kind of stuck on that nothing at the property line. I think the 10 decibels is high. I think well, I can speak for myself. I'm fine with it at the property line, whatever we decide. But I think 10 decibels at the nearest structure or residence is a lot, because at the property line it could be 20, it could be 50. So I agree. We should probably focus on the property line, but I don't know if 0 at the property line is a reasonable condition. I mean, we have to pass reasonable conditions if we go through with this. But I think, I'm open for lower than 10 at the property line.
I don't.
I know where you're coming from, though. I do understand.
I don't know what the magic number is
Yeah.
other than 0 and 10. Is 5? I mean,
The state guidelines say property lines. I'm sticking with property line.
Yeah, I'm
'Cause
okay.
even in their guidance where they kind of waver a little bit, they say residence or on the property where there's a sensitive receiver or something like that. And, I mean, for all I know, one of the applicants could have some fancy acoustic listening thing that's for spiritual healing or who knows what. And who am I to say that whatever they have works or not? But if it's a sensitive receiver, then they could say that that meets that guidelines. That's why I think the state says property line in the letter of the law. I'm going to stick with property line. And it doesn't matter if the residence is further away. So that's where I'm kind of,
Yeah, I don't want anybody impacted
yeah.
with no, I mean, at all. But again, any condition has to be reasonable, and I definitely think 10 at the residence is not reasonable. I think it could be louder at the property line. I think that's too much. So I do agree, at the property line is where we should kind of focus. And I do think it should be lower than what the state guideline is. I think from the past, I don't want to call them errors, but past decisions, we know that, 10 is still too loud.
Don't forget, one of the things that we've established, that has not been established, is the effect of megahertz. The state guidelines don't talk about that. We've asked several times to get some definition of how that sound's going to transfer and what it's going to be like. So I think Joe's definition of nothing coming off identifies that. And certainly if you're going to even go with the state's definition, I'd go beyond that. But more importantly for me is looking at what the applicants given us themselves. They gave us a level schedule showing how the radius. They also said even with their screening, the acoustic panels provide a loss of 30 decibels. So if you took a look at this chart and you removed 30 decibels from this, the property line is only 30 meters. It's in radius too, 30 meters off of that. And 30 meters is 55 decibels. Decibels. So my concern is we could say we can set criteria, and I think we should set criteria, but I think we also can indicate that at the best case, it can't be closer than what they've discerned as being what their panel could do. Their panel can only insulate 30. I don't know that we can test that. We haven't tested it, and I'm suspicious of it, just because of what Tim was saying of how it's constructed. But I'm saying at the best case, given what the applicant is saying, this thing shouldn't be more closer than what we're talking about is 200 meters, 300, 600 feet away from any property line. And I think we're within our rights to be able to say, we don't care where you put it, but it's got to be 600 feet away from any property line, and then we can add the definition of any noise. I'm concerned that we get to the point where they're already built out, they're going for an electric permit, and they're going to be in court, and they're going to say, and we're going to be fighting this forever. I don't want them investing that kind of money, and I don't want to be arguing that issue at that point. I'd rather be able to have that issue, but basically as a baseline, put in what they've themselves have indicated is the condition that's going to be presented by their equipment.
I know that they've mentioned, they're not going to move it. So, and I know you want them to move it. Assuming they don't, it's on them to add 2 of those walls, or 3, or 4, to get it down to whatever we decide as far as anywhere between 0 and 10 at the property line. So I mean, moving it, in my opinion, has nothing to do with it. It has to do with if this is properly going to cover the sound or not. And if it's not, then it doesn't go up.
I'm just using their information they gave us. I'm not saying where it has to go. I'm just saying, according to their own, even if I'm using the 10 decibels, it's 200 meters.
If it doesn't meet the state guidelines, then it
That's the state guidelines.
Yeah, and if it doesn't meet our guideline, then
But then you got a litigation. Then you're going to have a thing fully built out with several $1 million, and you're going to have some judge looking at saying, what am I weighing against? And maybe it's 10 decibels, maybe it's 15, but I don't want to go there. I don't want to wait for, then we have to litigate this thing for 3 years.
I don't think this is a spoiler, but I'm pretty sure that this is going to, end up back in court, so.
Well,
But at the same time, I'm sorry.
I'd rather be in court with us using information they provided and their criteria that they've given us and saying, based on this, we're saying, site plan, put it where you said it's not going to do any harm. And that's what I'm asking for. And then you put that other criteria on, and if they blow that out of the water, they're still stuck with their own information. You're saying, this is where the information you gave us, this can't legally be placed anywhere closer to a property line. And therefore, we're not saying we have to put it, you find a place. That's your responsibility. You've got a zillion acres here. find another place to put it that's not going to be closer than you're claiming is going to be
It's
impacting.
gonna
I just don't
it's
see
gonna
how
meet
it-
the state's guidelines,
Huh?
basically.
Even if it's the state guidelines. I'm using state guidelines, and that puts it 600 meters, 600 feet away from anybody.
I just don't see how it's any different to just say that you need to provide additional noise reduction to make sure that it doesn't hit the property line. I think that's taking an extra step and saying you have to abide by this guideline and you have to move it wherever except for, they've already indicated they're not going to move it. So, I mean, I don't know why we're stuck on that point still.
That's it.
It's been rehashed, 100 times.
That's it. I'm sorry.
My impression, that's okay. My impression is that they're not going to move it. So we have to work with what we have, and the fact is, they said they're not going to move it. So if we are putting conditions, we put that condition that at the property line, you can't be above a certain amount, whether they put 10 of those and they have to adjust that chart or not. It's not on us,
They have to come back
it's
to
on
us
them.
because they need to
Whether
put it-
they say they can move it or not is not our problem. Our problem is we're putting a reasonable condition on. If they can't meet it, then they shouldn't put the project on, or they do something else. That's their burden, not ours. Ours is not to make it happen because they don't want to move it. They had it once before, they had it somewhere else, they gave us a lot of reasons, they got a lot of land. It's all upland land, and they could find some other place to put it that's not going to impact the neighbors, at least to the state level.
I
Let
think putting
alone-
the sound condition on it does exactly what you want.
Yeah,
That's my opinion on it.
It can be worded in a way that applicant can have to meet the guideline by either adding additional mitigation methods or adjusting the location of whatever noise-producing equipment is part of the project.
Yeah, whatever they have to do to reduce that noise. I mean, my main concern is the noise, right now with this particular topic is the noise, and, playing devil's advocate, if I'm, attorney for the applicant, I've already said we're not going to move it 15 times, and you make that a condition, then,
Let's ask town council. I mean, my understanding is we have the right to put on reasonable conditions. Even though they've announced they can't meet those, is that our burden to not put those conditions on if they're reasonable and appropriate, based upon?
well, just to
evidence
clarify, I didn't say that was our burden. I said that we can easily accomplish what you're trying to accomplish with an easier condition. I think the condition you're proposing is immediately going to get it appealed, no matter what we do. I think the condition, as Tim said, to include there, however you need to muffle the sound, if you have to move it, if you have to, increase trees, increase berm, whatever you need to do, it has to be under X at the property line.
And that's why I suggested that second stage of, okay, engineer's gotten a baseline level, now he's gonna look at what you're proposing, because they know how all these sound baffling stuff works. Say, okay, this is going to give you here, and they have the guideline from the state, that says 10 decibels above background at the property line. They look at what they have for ambient, they look at what's being produced, they look at what's mitigations in place, and they go, no, then the applicant can continue to work with them to find a plan that works. And if that requires an updated site plan that comes back to us, then that's what it requires.
But under your proposal, they would have, the only way you could test it is after it's fully built out and operational.
That's why adding, the first step is get a background level. Second step is the engineer who gets the background level looks at what's being proposed, both from a noise generation perspective and a muffling perspective, and lays it out, and I'm sure they have fancy computer models that can tell them what the sound levels are going to be at whatever areas. And they can look and say, okay, the property lines are here, the sound levels at these property lines are going to be X. If they don't meet state guidelines, then it doesn't move forward, it doesn't get built. That's, because I understand you don't want to get to that 11th hour situation.
Yeah.
But that's why I want to have that level of, and I think the applicant would probably prefer not to build the whole thing and tear it down just because somebody didn't do the math right on the sound. So this way, get a baseline, get an evaluation of what you think it will be, and then you can go ahead and build it, and then make sure it's actually working after it's constructed. And then that can be your go for the electrical interconnection. So there's multiple stages.
Why wouldn't have that have been their burden to submit during the hearing? And did not they do that by giving us this information? Is that basically their understanding of what these inverters will do? And I'm just saying, that's their best case, that's the case that they've drawn for us, and based on this case, it does not work. So why are we giving everybody another shot at dealing with this down the road? Are we now opening up, it's still hearing new information? And then we're going to
What we're telling them is that it can't be above a certain level at the property line. We're not, I mean, it's just cut and dry. It can't be above a certain level at this property line.
But
So now you're getting into where they're placing things. I mean, we're going to tell them where to put the panels, where to put their trucks when they park. I mean, we're saying a minimum requirement of it can't be above this much at this line, that's it. It's on you to figure it out, how to do it, get the engineers, do all of that before,
But
you know.
we're not dealing with actual noise, we're dealing with engineers telling us what the noise should be. So until you get the actual noise, to Joe's complaint and to the neighbor's complaint, it may look great on paper, but now we're going to be stuck with, they're going to come up with something, they're going to say, based on this and based on that, there shouldn't be any noise. And what happens if there is noise?
So what do you propose?
I'm proposing that we look at their schedule, we look at the schedules they provided. I would use Joe's standard and say, we want Joe's standard, but in any event, it shouldn't be any closer than X to anybody's property line.
But how do you know that X will not create noise?
I don't know that it will,
Yeah.
but at least.
And it could
I'm-
create
I'm
noise
at
in another
least- I'm
property
at
line.
least
I think
putting
that's,
it-
I think you're looking way too deep into it. I
I'm
think
putting a
it's,
condition in that they've put before us. They've said, this is the radius of our inverter. I'm not saying that, it may be more. So I'm saying, at the very least, they should be complying with their own information, whether we use the 10 decibels as a state level, even giving the acoustics 30 decibels that they've said. Even using those two things, and I don't know, agree with them, but at least that's the minimum distance it should be. And then I would still apply Joe's test and let them deal with that. And if a court wants to throw out Joe's test, that's fine. This is something that will be sustainable, because
So-
it's their information.
I guess I'm confused. How would saying that take what they have there and say, well, we don't agree with what you're proposing here. We want you to make sure that this radius, you know, that the sound is less. Do it however you want, but the sound is less. I don't understand how that is not
Are you looking
accomplishing.
at this from a perspective of the guidelines that you've given us, even with a 30 decibel reduction, mean that you're violating state guidelines, which means we can't approve this project? Is that your position?
Correct.
Okay.
But they also provided information that their baffles, supposedly, their sound baffles, Acoustablock, drop the transmission of sound by 30 decibels, so.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, so
To
they
Orin's
get 30
point,
out.
Well,
You're
he's-
still-
No,
still-
this, as
Aaron-
I'm reading this, is two different things. This is without baffling.
Right.
And the baffles that they propose,
to Orin's point, the radius at the property line on the map in your left hand is at 55. So if you lose 30, you're still at 25.
Correct.
So you're over.
So we need to condition it to say that that radius has to go down even further. I mean,
So that's.
it's the simplest way to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
That's my position, that's my
So-
point. So they're basically not complying with state laws on their own,
So-
given their own information.
Your position is that you have given us a plan that violates state rules,
Correct.
rather than conditioning it on meeting state rules. You've given us a plan that doesn't meet them.
That works.
So that's two sides of that coin, I guess.
and I'll just raise the point one more time in terms of, you know, is it 10, is it 5, is it 6? I'm going to guess that a dripping faucet is less than 1 decibel. But who doesn't get up in the middle of the night and shut the faucet off so it doesn't drip for that lousy 1 decibel? And these people are gonna be annoyed with any sound whatsoever. There must be tech, I don't care if they put the inverters, you know, dig a hole and bury them. Do what you've gotta do. Do what you've gotta do and contain the sound to your property. Again, I feel strongly about that, and I've said it more than once, so I'll just leave it at that. Again, we've approved, not all of you having been on the board, but we've approved a number of these, and they've all come back to haunt us. This one, if it's approved, I hope does not.
Anyone else have thoughts on this particular item?
Do we need to go dig into megahertz? I think that would also be part of a noise condition.
Well, my original language was, and I found it here.
At any frequency, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I might loosen that somewhat to be something about, regardless of decibel level, frequencies given off by the equipment should be,
It's tough because there's no standard to,
yeah.
that's the hard
I
one.
mean, yeah, it's, yeah. And it's not even really spelled out in the state's guidelines.
So I'm looking at it now.
Yeah. 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 There is yeah, because decibels are weighted towards normal human hearing range.
Yeah.
So so that's the frequency range that they generally look at is in kind of the sweet spot of human hearing. But the state guidelines about the pure tone do talk to frequency, basically saying that, if I'm dumbing this down correctly, the pure tone language of the state guidelines is that if there is, if at any frequency band it's significantly louder than the ones around it. So, if there are 10 frequency bands, you can't have number 8 shooting off and being super loud, even though, and 6 and 9 are lower. And 8 could be that higher frequency range that causes problems for some people. So if the normal human hearing range is 3 to 7, but 9, because of this equipment, whatever sounds are in frequency range 9 are high for whatever reason. That may be dog whistle frequency or whatever it is. If the state rules talk about that exceeding the ones around it by a certain level, then that would fall under that guideline. So,
Well, according to Body Human, the new book of knowledge
yeah.
from 1967, the standardized result for human hearing is 15 to 20,000 hertz.
Yeah.
But it's not megahertz.
But, I mean,
So that wasn't helpful, I apologize.
So in terms of megahertz, I would fall back again to the state guidelines.
You'd follow, I'm sorry?
I'd fall back again to the state guidelines about the pure tone sound.
Is that what that addresses? I don't understand it either. I'm reading it, it says.
Yeah.
I believe it does.
I'd even reduce it further. I mean, I don't think,
Level, at any given, it says, a pure tone exists if the sound pressure level at any given octave band center frequency exceeds the level of the 2 adjacent octane bands by 3 or more decibels.
Yeah. So if we look at frequency bands from like 0 to 10, you can't
I know.
have one out of, they should, if you're making like a sound, it'll probably be loudest at whatever frequency it is, whether that's you're singing at a G or an F. Or if somebody's a soprano or a bass, or however you want to look at it. But there shouldn't be any range of sound that is louder than the decibel ranges around it by a certain amount.
Paul, help me out. I don't think I'm making this up. Crane Street, not Crane Street,
Clap?
Clap Street. Did the building inspector not go out there with some type of sound instrument? And
He's been out there, but I'm not sure that he had a gauge or not.
because I thought he had tested it and it was within compliance.
He has made that statement. I just don't know how he determined it.
I'm assuming compliance made reference to the 10 decibels. What else would he be referring to in terms of compliance? And again, that makes my point. I don't know what the sound waves, you know, the audible or the versus the inaudible frequencies are. I think we're taking on too much of a burden in trying to determine what's permissible and what's not permissible, what's going to be acceptable, what's not going to be acceptable. And again, just make one more pitch for, I don't care what you do, don't want to hear it at any level on the property line. I don't know how else you get around it. Pick a number, 5, 8, what frequency?
I think we're stuck to a point with the state rules, but also I think that's a little too lenient. And I think I agree with on the property line.
The state rules are, again, this is a special permit.
Yeah, no, I think that, I agree there too.
And I think, personally, I think it's reasonable to require, I mean, this isn't, it'd be one thing if it was an airport. No one's invented jets that make no sound. These are solar panels that, you know, the only, I don't say the only sound, but most concerning sound is that of the inverters. The inverters are physically definable. There should be some methodology, put them in a building. I don't want to define what your solution is. I want to define what the problem is, and I don't want to have a problem. So I don't know why we're tiptoeing around whether it should be this or should be that. End of discussion. Make all the sound you want on your own property. Could care less. As soon as it crosses the line, then you violated someone else's property rights. And I don't know any other way of solving the problem.
I agree with you that it's not on us to determine how they do it. I think that if they can't do it, then they don't build. But I also think that 0 at the property line is not reasonable. I think,
Zero above background. For all I know, you know, whatever sound does emanate from the inverters gets drowned out by the birds and traffic or whatever else.
Well, I think for me personally, 10 is too high, I think. So I'm at between 0 and 10. I mean, like I said, I think 0 is unreasonable at the property line. If you're saying 0 at the residence, then I think, or at the nearest residence, I think I could be behind that a little more. But at the property line's a little bit different for me.
So what do we do for the person who buys a lot of land, builds a house, wasn't a residence in 2019, but now is listening to these things hum, and because there wasn't a residence there, back when we approved this, they're out of luck.
I wouldn't say out of luck. I would say at the property line, 0 at the property line is unreasonable, I think. 10, well, like my argument before was, 10 at the residence, I think is also unreasonable because it could be 50 at the property line to get to 10. So I think at the property line is a good starting point for me, but I think 0 is unreasonable. I think.
But let me play devil's advocate. What makes it unreasonable?
Because you could step 3 feet onto the property where there's not going to be a structure, and you might not hear anything. So you could be right at that line and hear, 1 decibel, and then they can't build. I think that's unreasonable.
No, I'm not saying they can't build. Find a way to contain the sound.
Yeah. I just think, we need to give reasonable conditions, and I disagree with 0 at the property line. I think the property line is a good place to have wherever we're going to do, if we do any stipulations, but I think we need to be reasonable. And 0 at the property line is not reasonable. We wouldn't put that on any other any other property that I know of. I don't think any would accept that either.
I don't know that I agree, in that I think we would agree that the introduction of these solar panels in an 80 residential area calls some scrutiny. We basically, what Tim was saying, on its face, what they proposed violates the law. So now we have some conditions. We also have a sound situation which nobody's able to identify. So coupled with those two things, we're saying, A, as submitted, it doesn't qualify, it violates the state law of 10 decibels based upon information they provided us. And now we're saying, and we haven't been satisfied as how far megahertz can go. We're saying basically at the property line above background noise, we don't want any noise coming from this. And I don't know that that's an unusual condition, given that this is extraordinary to the location. It's not in a commercial zone where when you expect cars, you expect a whole bunch of things. People moving in this area they don't expect noise from a bog. You wouldn't expect zero noise from a bog. And now taking the next step up, we're saying just do no harm. Do what you want to do on your land, but do no harm to these people. We're not getting involved with values and anything else. We're just saying that's what we'd like to see. But if we start off saying basically the plans and what you propose doesn't even comply with state law, and I think that gives us a real good stepping stone to make other conditions that I think maybe are warranted, especially given that we don't know what megahertz are. And we really have not been, this is a new system. It's not one that's been used before. It's coupled with large batteries. So there's a lot of unknowns here. So for us to take the step in saying, we put the burden on you to make sure you can put it somewhere that doesn't have any impact on its neighbors is not an unusable condition.
To play devil's advocate, this project under the zoning rules that we're looking at for is an as-of-right use.
I'm sorry?
It's an as-of-right use. Under the SMART program, under 18 other different layers of this. So to that point, that part of it, I don't think is part of can really be a whole lot of our thought process.
Well, no, the as of right, that means they could put an as of, from my understanding, and basically what I thought we were proving, we were giving them the as of right, which meant they have a right to put solar farms, solar panels on top of bogs.
As part of the SMART program.
Right, it could be done. Where it's got to be and where their inverters are was not part of you have the right to do that.
Right.
That's what the site plan is supposed to do, is determine that where they're going to put these things and how they're going to do it is not going to impact their neighbors. That stays within our jurisdiction. And whether it's a special permit or even site plan, those are things that comes back to us. We're saying you can do it. You can build a warehouse. But then we say, well, you can do a warehouse, but you can't do this. You have to be here. You can't make these noises. And I think that's what falls back on us. And I think with a special permit, we do have a lot of discretion, and I think it also falls under site plan, when it says you can't impact your neighbors. And that's what it's doing.
We also have the responsibility to be reasonable, and I think 0 at the property line is not reasonable. I think it should be, again, I'm saying the same thing over, I apologize. I think the state code of 10 at the residence or even property line is way too high. I think there's a happy medium somewhere in there, but 0 at the property line I think is overstepping and yeah.
Sure.
Do we want to keep hitting on this, or do we want to talk about other conditions?
I'd like to hear the board's discussion around the batteries and the concern that you had all expressed prior to this remand, back earlier in the project about batteries and such.
The batteries in terms of the
Whatever
noise
terms-
level, or
whatever-
in terms of whether they're allowed, or?
Safety, potential risks, over wetlands, fires, all of the things that I know you had discussed with the original proposal. And, even though it's scaled back quite a bit, you know, I think 40% of the battery concerns are still there. So if you still have recollection to what your concerns were around the batteries, maybe we can discuss those a little bit as well.
Well, they were in a different location, so I think that was part of it, to Orrin's point.
They're actually, the location they're in now is the
Yeah.
same location they're in when we talked about it before.
No.
They moved it,
Not before the
no.
remand.
The very first moment.
the very first, yeah, the first time, yeah.
Yeah.
But then
They
it
were
was-
not there. Then they got moved.
They got moved, yeah. They were at the corner of the eastern property line.
Well, the initial submittal,
Yeah, the
the
very first
submittal was in this location, and then when the
Oh, that's
noise
right,
issue
moved
came
it out,
along, then they moved
we
it.
moved it back.
Yeah, they moved
Now
it
they're
back
moving it back.
when they brought the panels down. So of the very first proposal, yeah, it was exactly where it is now.
Yeah, so it
Then they
was
changed
here,
it.
Then they moved it up here, Kevin, and now it's back here.
So does that mean?
It's the original location from the original filing.
Yeah.
Does that mean they're safer now in this newer location? Or what does that mean?
The point of moving them, is, my understanding was the noise issue. But then they also had panels all the way up there as well, so. From what they said is that it's not feasible. I mean, whether that's true or not, yeah, I couldn't tell you, but,
What they've stated is, they've moved it back with this submittal because the submittal is smaller. The concern was if they keep it at that location where it was near Fairleigh, that there's a voltage drop. I'm not an electrical engineer. I spoke to our electrical inspector who did say that voltage drops are a real issue, you know, the farther the distances go, and especially when it's, I believe at this point it would be, well, anyway.
from what I remember, he said it was significant enough to not be feasible to keep them up
Yes,
there.
yeah, I remember that discussion. I guess my question is, getting beyond the discussion of sound, are there other issues with the batteries and the storage system in general that you had beyond the megahertz that they produce through the inverters that we
There-
should discuss?
There were a couple of issues that were raised, one of which was basically the SMART program allows for 2 megahertz,
2 megahertz AC or DC or one or the other?
yeah,
Transmitted out,
yeah.
Yeah.
allows
Yeah,
for,
To hit the grid at any one time.
at the grid.
yeah.
And that's the program. By installing the extra equipment, they're now expanding their output capacity to almost like 8 versus 2. And that's basically the question. One question was whether or not that was allowed under the SMART program. The other is basically, obviously, the hazardous component of that type of equipment and what it can provide and the danger it may pose in terms of its operation. Which comes back to the question of basically the water resource district. This is basically in a water resource district, and I know I had raised it during the hearings. They did not identify it as a Zone 2 water resource district in either one of their applications, and I'm to this day not clear as to why they would not be required to comply with it relative to it being either an enlargement or alteration of an existing use that does not conform to water resource districts, activities that involves handling toxic or hazardous materials greater than that posed and associated with normal household use, which activities shall require a special permit to prevent contamination of groundwater or surface water, or use improper, to render impervious more than 15% of 250 square feet of any lot. And basically, the panels, I think, cover that. So I still don't know why maybe, I know that came back, and I don't know if it's town council, whether you suggested that it was not applicable. I'm not sure why it was, I know it raised it, but it was.
No, my comment was that it's the building commissioner's determination whether it's applicable or not. The applicant is claiming that it is not applicable, and this was my understanding. I could be wrong. that the applicant was claiming that because it's an as-of-right use, then they don't have to get a special permit because the as-of-right use, the bylaw changed after the Water Resource Protection District portion of the bylaw was put in, and so town meeting knew that, and so when they made it an as-of-right use, that they don't need to get those. That was my understanding of the argument. I don't buy that argument. But my position all along has been that it's the building commissioner's determination whether a special permit is required or not. If the building commissioner says a special permit is required, they have to come back for a special permit. There's nothing in the bylaw that requires that they apply for all of their permits at one time.
But I thought it's either under the zoning bylaw for solar panels or site plan that says, one of our obligations is to make sure they comply with all the zoning bylaws.
It says that site plan is required, it's actually under the bylaw, the solar bylaw that was actually overturned. But it's the one that you are working under. And it says that they have to comply with site plan approval to ensure zoning compliance, something like that. And the way that I read that is that you have to comply with site plan approval. Site plan approval doesn't grant you the power to determine whether what under the bylaw is being complied with or not. It's the building commissioner. It says clearly in the bylaw that the building commissioner shall be the one that administers the zoning bylaw.
So it's your position that the applicant is, quote-unquote, taking a risk by not asking for
Yes.
that relief in advance of this stage of the project?
Yes,
Because they get to a point the building commissioner could just say no.
correct.
Okay.
However, the building commissioner, honestly, the building commissioner, you could do site plan, they could have come in for every single thing they needed. They can go to the building commissioner to get a building permit, and he can say, wait a second, your side setback doesn't comply. It's something that doesn't get picked up in site plan, if it doesn't get picked up, they're still out of luck. They have to fix that.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess technically there's always a risk, but if there's a question as to whether they're in a zone that they need a special permit for and they're gonna say no, they're gonna have to plead their case to the building commissioner and he's gonna make that determination based on zoning bylaw.
I thought it said, what section is that, what section is that?
Which one?
Which one are?
The, the bogs,
Well, it's 20, but it's 22, but it's
22 is the solar one.
prior one that we need to look at. So it says that,
The old one, the original.
But,
Which one we're looking at?
to
it says that, subject to site plan review to determine conformance with the Norton zoning bylaw.
In the definitions, right, Amy? That's where, in the definitions
In the
section?
as-of-right
Yeah,
citing,
yeah.
yeah, that's what,
in
so it's
term-
in the definitions, but it's in the definitions under 22, not under the
Right.
definitions section.
Yes, yes. Under that article's definition.
Yes.
Kevin, to your larger point, I think the fire department had a number of comments about the batteries and procedures and training about that. So those are things that we would include. I think the question about the SMART program, I mean, I just keep coming back to the only reason this project is even possible at this location is the SMART program. So the SMART program says you can't have batteries, then you can't have batteries, or you can't have it here. So, I mean, I view that as not, whatever the SMART program says is going to govern it one way or the other to that point.
Yeah.
I guess the last bullet, I guess, is whether we feel that battery storage in this case represents kind of an accessory use to the solar facility, or whether we don't. One of the applicant's counsel has suggested that the wording of the bylaw reflecting to storage facilities reflected to battery storage, I think, was a stretch. So, but I think, I don't know how people feel, whether they think batteries are accessory use to power generation. I would tend to think yes.
For what it's worth, my son is building a house. He hasn't made a determination, but he does go solar. Tesla offers what's called Powerwall. It's a 3-day supply of power. And no one's told me that he needs a special permit. It's viewed as an accessory use. Regardless of how one feels about whether this should or should not be built, if you're going to build it, to me, it almost makes sense to maximize its utility. I don't personally have issues with batteries as long as certain precautions are taken.
Yeah. They would make the noise go longer, but from your frame of mind, the noise isn't going anywhere anyway, so that's an irrelevant point.
Well, yeah.
As long as they're safe.
And I think the SMART program was probably gearing towards brownfields where there are no abutters or neighbors anywhere in the near proximity. And I'm thinking, I know there was a discussion about batteries and potential risk with electromagnetic fields and, down the line, risks on human health and such. So given that this project is so close to, residences, that's why I threw it out as well. If there are any, discussion items that needed to go on around that part of it. I know there were some
I guess EMF
speakers that spoke to that. One was a doctor and such, so, but I had watched the meeting that I had watched, the replay of.
I guess EMF is a whole other can of worms they haven't really talked about a whole lot.
Yeah.
That's why I bring it up.
So any other thoughts on the batteries?
Well, again, I don't know that we got any declaratory information establishing that they would not be that danger from the batteries. I don't know. We've got a lot of information, and I know, I think we were looking to get maybe some expert assistance in evaluating that. There's a lot of information we got from the applicants and from the neighbors, but certainly it was beyond something I was able to determine once definitively.
I know in their initial application materials, they did have kind of a radius chart about EMF emissions from the site, which I believe would have reflected the original siting of the inverters, which was then old and is now new again. I don't have that.
Can you pull that for the next meeting? Unless you can put it up now. You know,
I don't recall what that was.
Yeah, an EMF one?
I do
I
remember
think
that.
they did have,
Yeah.
I know they had one. I know there was discussion between the applicant and one of the abutters about what the EMF levels above background would be at their property line. I believe
There's
that was
also something in the information about the batteries, too. I don't have that
Yeah,
with me
I
now.
believe it was actually with Mr. Cogliano. It was very early in the public hearing, in the hearing process. And it was in that big giant binder of stuff they gave us at the beginning.
This one?
I can try to find it if you want.
I don't know. I mean, I've been trying to keep everything, but you
Okay.
never know. I'll look to see here too.
They're called binders, so.
Yeah.
This seems like it would be one that would be included here, though.
I'll look just at my stuff down.
I'm pretty sure there was something with the battery descriptions and specs as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are specs on the batteries, but that's gonna be
No, but it
Greek
had-
to me, so.
Yeah. So, while you're looking at that, just to keep things in perspective, as I said, I'm not going to push a vote for tonight, obviously. But we'll only have 2 more meetings before the deadline by the court.
And
So that'll be October 1st and 22nd. So just to keep that in mind. Did we move it?
I think we were gonna talk to Joe about the dates.
We did move it, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Because I can't make the 15th, that's,
Well, we'll figure that out. But yeah, either way, there's only 2 more meetings, so we have to make sure that we have a vote by then.
Well, that's all right, don't worry, Tim.
I know there was a discussion about it, so we can try to
Do we-
find
do-
that.
Do we have to have a signed decision, or do we just have to vote on the decision by that date?
I'll have to find, I think it has to be filed with the town clerk by then.
I'm sorry?
Signed.
I think it has to be
Signed.
filed with the town clerk, but I will check the remand order right now.
I'm gonna keep scanning, but if other people wanna move on to other topics, I will keep going.
All right.
The board shall issue and file the remand decision with the Norton Town Clerk as soon as possible and no later than 90 days after the close of the public hearing.
So that would be November 4th.
Correct.
Yeah, so we have 2 meetings in October to get this done.
So in theory, we probably want to have our
Vote next meeting.
vote next meeting and have the finished written decision to sign at the second meeting.
Do we need to at least start up a draft so we have something to work, like some of the givens that we can put
I know there was
in a
discussion.
draft, so we can start working off of that next week? In addition to some.
Yeah, I'll work with Paul on what things that we discussed, and we can add, change, correct.
Decommissioning, this research that we had provided to us talks a lot about the decommissioning costs in the future and 30, 40-year project, and that, some kind of a compensation should be built on the front end. Some maybe money escrow to provide for full decommissioning at the end of the project. Was that discussed at all among the board on
There's-
how much that would be, and how do you determine that, and with escalating costs and such?
There's a
Because
decommissioning plan with
Yeah.
an annual escalator, I think, somehow
And,
accounted for
There is.
surety-wise.
I thought that at the last hearing, not this remand hearing, Orrin, you had suggested changes to the decommissioning.
Eliminating,
And they did, we put those in.
eliminating all the salvage values.
Right. So there is value, and I would suggest we keep the same, I thought it was a good condition. I would suggest we keep the same condition that Orrin had come up with.
And does the applicant have to put all that money in escrow and let it sit there throughout the term of the project while it's active and
That's the town's preference. There have been some examples where it's been insurance, but this is coming up with 54 Plain Street, because we didn't specify it in the decision. They thought it could be through an insurance policy, which they've done, which we have done in the past, but the treasurer really doesn't want that. We would rather have the money given to us, put in an account for that. So,
And would that be on us to request that? Have the actual money given to the town rather than?
We could put it in the condition,
Okay.
in the decommissioning condition.
Yeah, in the material you provided you gave us, they called for updating the decommission schedule every 5 years. I don't think we provided for that, and that might be something we want to look at.
Do we know what the total amount is, Orrin?
There was an amount that they provided. Now, I don't know, we never did our own study. We were relying on the study that they provided. This thing suggested basically that we get our own study, but we haven't.
Was it corrected? It was corrected, right, after,
It was updated
For the
to not
salvage
account for
issue.
salvage value.
Yeah.
yeah.
It was lower than I
Here it is.
expected it to be. I forget what the number actually was, but
here it is. This is the updated study.
Yeah, it was
This is
12
salvage.
for, I think the total was to recovery cost, 486,529, is that correct?
so, I know there were two columns. One was with salvage value, and one was without.
What was the one on top of that, yeah? This is revised, this is what they had, and this is what they came up with. This is the new one. This was their salvage value.
Yup.
So they came down to that, and I'm saying we gotta do that.
I think I have it right up on the screen.
Screen's off, Paul.
Yeah, it was
Oh, well,
Is there?
486,000.
It might be good to have that validated through some source. Because in this article, there was a lot of discussion about, if you don't have enough money to do a full decommissioning, you're gonna have a property that's
Oh.
gonna be sitting in
Yeah.
poor disrepair and half decommissioned for eternity potentially.
Yeah, and I think in this article it mentioned above ground, below ground. I think they talked about removing wires, but I don't know if it covered everything. And again, we didn't have it peer reviewed. We just relied on the engineer. Is that the 486,000 one?
We have someone in our firm that simply just
Yeah.
concentrates on these agreements.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they are lengthy and detailed.
Okay, good.
to make
They-
sure.
You don't have anyone in your group that can back up, validate the numbers, do you?
I don't know who would do that, some kind of actuary, I don't know.
Yeah, I would recommend that be held in escrow myself in an account, rather than any other form of future compensation, just for cleanliness and, accessibility and such.
Yeah, there's also bonding for landscaping. Now, that falls under us as well, I believe.
yes.
Do we have a number that how do we come up with that number?
That would be, what we did with 54 Plain Street was, we put a condition in to say that they would come back with a number for the amount for landscaping, and that it would come back to you all.
Do we have any, they just provide a number, do we get it peer reviewed, or there's a lot of
It has,
landscaping involved?
they haven't submitted it yet, but I'm pretty certain the condition said that it would have to come back to the board for approval.
Okay. The other thing that we were talking about was that stormwater, and I'm not sure how you want to approach it. My suggestion would be, I would like to adopt the order of conditions established by the Conservation Commission, and basically, as to those things that are disputed, if we want to actually go walk through them, obviously, there's something with it, sort of the dates and some of those things, that's up to them. But in particular, those things that they've questioned as whether or not they were the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. I think in many cases, they clearly fall under our jurisdiction, so I want to make sure that we adopt those as part of our decision, in addition to adopting the final version of the conditions. We did not do peer review of stormwater. I mean, we had no peer review of it. And myself, although I'm relying on the conservation under Chapter 133, there is a mechanism, as we've explored last week, where the town requires the stormwater management and the management program. That all goes through conservation. We have that same authority, and certainly I asked to defer, to wait until after their order of conditions. The applicant didn't want to do that. And so therefore, I think we're within our rights to rely on that order of conditions as is finally determined, but also add to it those things that they objected to that may in fact be under our jurisdiction rather than the Conservation Commission, such as decommissioning. There's a couple of things, the mechanism for which they just identified as being our jurisdiction. So we should identify those and clearly say that that's part of our decision. So when it comes back and it's disallowed on conservation, we have the ability to restore it.
If I may, Orin, I don't think we want to use the word adopt at all, because we want to take those conditions and put them into our decision.
That's fine.
And I don't think we want to put in anything about adopting the Conservation Commission's final order of conditions, because we don't know where that's going to end up. So we're better off just taking all of the conditions that we like in the existing order of conditions as it is right now and putting those into our site plan as conditions.
Okay, but you may want to look at some of those things that they just dispute because of the dates and stuff like that, so we don't run into that same issue.
We can work through those.
Yeah.
We can just put them all in and change them so
That's
they're
fine.
planning board conditions rather than Conservation Commission.
No, I agree, that's fine.
If the applicant seems to feel that they're our jurisdiction, who are we to disagree with?
I'm sorry?
If the applicant seems
It's
to
true
feel that our jurisdiction.
That's the basis of their argument, is that it's not Comcom's
If it's-
jurisdiction, it's planning board, so.
If they feel it's our jurisdiction, then who are we to argue?
Yeah, I agree.
What about production of the cranberry bogs going forward after the project is built? I know that early on there was discussion about research that was done through UMass Amherst, which didn't include actual cranberry bogs, but other farming, and that the estimate was that it would continue to produce 60% of what it produces now, or something around that number.
I think they're required, stop me if I'm wrong, they're required to do at least 50%.
Maintain smart.
To maintain at least 50%.
I don't think there's actually a number. The SMART, I feel like I'm dominating the conversation tonight, but the SMART program requires that they follow like best farming practices. I forget the exact wording, but basically that they.
Best management practices.
Best management practices or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's not a physical number attached to it. But they have to submit numbers to the state, and the SMART program is part of that. And they also have to submit them to the town, and they already do that. So we can see Bog 7 production over the last however long, if we cared to look it up. But, I mean, if they don't have the SMART program, they don't have a project at this site, so.
And the 50% wasn't part of the SMART program? Why do I think that?
I don't think it was either.
Yeah.
I don't know, Tim, I'm with you. I thought there was no
I know-
number.
I know that they said that they assumed it was going to be more than 50%.
I know there were estimates, but in my mind, the overriding guideline was that they had to follow best management practices, or whatever the wording
Right,
was, and
yeah.
that there wasn't a specific target number attached.
Yeah.
I think
But
there
that
was
this-
more of a concern that the bogs continue to operate effectively, not just
Right.
best practices.
Which is-
But I
is part
thought
of
I
the
saw a
SMART
number,
program.
maybe it was in conservation, I thought I saw a number of it. I thought it was at least have to maintain something.
Yeah.
Because I think there was a concern that best practices could mean anything, and I think that they cut that off with some kind of a guideline. I'm not.
Concom, maybe?
I know, I think COMCOM did it, but.
Because I think, for some reason, I remembered with Tim, in regards to the SMART program, there wasn't a yield requirement because you had to see how it went. Sometimes shading would be a positive in a hot year, maybe in the next year it might not be a great thing, like,
Yeah.
so there would be some potential fluctuation. I know they committed to maintaining the organic farming of the bog. They weren't gonna change that.
Yeah.
It says, under, this is on 21 of the order, this is the project is proposed as a dual-use solar project, and it talks about it, and it says, the program 2, and number 5, maximize sunshine reduction from shading by the panels of any square footage under the solar panels to not more than 50%, optimize the balance between,
50% shade.
That's what I'm getting, that
Shading, yeah.
50%
It's
then,
the
yeah.
shading, not
Okay.
the yield.
50%, yeah, more than 50% in terms of reduction of shading. Optimize the balance of, let me just see.
I think the production was also in that 50 to 60% range.
I know they were expecting it to be in that range, but yeah, that's probably where I got that 50%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the SMART program is the hammer in this case.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
if you're not meeting the SMART program, and following the practices, then you're not in the SMART program, which means you're not allowed on this site, which means we take it down, and that's it.
Yeah.
So-
Well,
Yeah,
kind of to Oren's point, though, it's hard to, from us, monitor that and hold them in compliance to, the production level as well as,
They submit the numbers to us too, to
Yeah.
the town, already, so.
yeah, exactly, it's easy to measure, right, but then if, to his point about the sound, what are your options if everything is built and done and running and you're well above the sound estimates, even
That's why you
on
have a
his
decommissioning
map.
plan.
Yeah.
But I think that was part of some of the neighbors' concern too, Kevin, was like, okay, well, they could say they harvested 5 cranberries and check, not the abundant yield that is produced now. Because I don't think there was like a given, I'll say, threshold to
Yeah.
maintain a production level.
Which would be hard to determine as well, too, because they're not giving it by each section.
They do.
Is it?
They do now.
Okay.
They submit it to, because I know when we had our meeting at, one of the meetings in the media center,
When Fred was there?
Fred was there, he talked about that they submit by bog to the town and the state, I think the state, now already. So somewhere in this building, there's probably a record of what bog 7 has produced for.
It probably feeds into the assessment for his taxes.
Something, yeah. So, so it will be tracked by bog, and if we had the ability and math skills, we could probably try and see how the yields in different bogs have varied, and even control that for non-solar bogs and solar bogs. So that way you're accounting for changing season, different summers, and something like that. So, but, yeah,
Well, it should be under the SMART program to kind of police that and make sure they apply, they, are meeting all of the requirements of the grant program, but it's new, so we don't really know.
Yeah.
5 years, they could go away and stop monitoring every single, solar project, and now it's up to the town to help make sure that they're compliant. Or not, and then we just have, land that's, radically changed based on historical use, and now, if it's not properly decommissioned,
That actually brings up a good point. If the SMART program isn't around in 5 years, that's when it would be decommissioned, because they wouldn't be complying. So.
and can you restore it back to the original land use? If they're only producing 30, 40% of the cranberries instead of 50 or 60, and you can't bring the balance back to life, now you've changed the look and contour and the use of that land forever, so.
That's the landowner's risk that they're taking.
Yeah.
Leasing the land to the solar company. But, yeah, I mean, I would assume that the SMART program has, or at least the permitting process for it is something that, especially for a solar project, they have to have made plans for longer term.
Yeah,
There's no, yeah,
20 years, right?
yeah. How, they would have had to have made plans to monitor over the life of solar projects, over the life of long-term projects, because it's a solar, that was what the SMART program is, it's all solar, so.
Does it affect us, the fact that there is really, currently, they've reported no openings under the SMART program? In terms of we're approving something that says they comply with the SMART program, but they're not able to participate in it? They don't have any
No.
If they don't have a
authorization?
smart program, then have a project.
Right.
If credits open up, then good for them. If they
That's a
don't,
condition of our bylaw, that.
Well, a condition that has to comply with the SMART program, so.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is part of the definition, I
Yeah.
think,
But
of
if
the,
it-
it's under the bylaw you're operating under,
If it's not in the smart program, it's not an allowed use,
right?
period.
It's not a dual use.
Yeah.
We have to check that.
The only reason it's allowed is because it's in the smart program.
So if we were to grant them the permit, it would be, was it 2 years on a special permit? It would be subject to them complying with the SMART program, so if they didn't get it within 2 years, they would. The permit
And the
would,
smart program changes its rules from year to year. So the next cycle, they may not do agriculture. So it's not like the 2020 plan's gonna roll around and there'll be a whole bunch of
Right.
new credits. They might be for something else. So that's, again, a risk the applicant's taking.
Mhm. Anything else we're thinking of?
I'm just looking at the notes that Paul generated, and I think they're helpful. I know that there's some discussion about additional screening for Fuller Drive, but I don't recall what it was.
Fuller Drive is to the west.
To the west, I'm looking at Paul's notes, and we're picking it up. from
There was a
discussion.
comment about looking more closely at that, about whether or not there is screening there. I don't know what the context of that was. And it's possible that that comment was made before the revised landscaping plan, because they submitted a second one to you. But obviously, we want to take a close look at landscaping. That's obviously an important aspect if this gets approved.
Yeah.
Warren, with regard to the SMART program, it's in the location, so if they don't qualify for the SMART program, they can't put it in that location.
Okay, but the special permit is obviously geared to that location, so.
There's no special permit under the bylaw that you're operating under. It's a site plan.
Okay, so,
Under the site plan, this essentially is an agricultural use.
Yeah, so it's
for
an
agricultural
as-of-right
land.
use if it's under the SMART program.
It's not a smart program, it's not an allowed use.
Correct. It wouldn't be an allowed use in that location, I guess.
Sorry, yeah.
I-
Everything's at
Same
this
result.
location, yeah.
I think it's the same result.
Can we get a peer review on the commissioning cost to make sure that we validate those numbers between now and the vote, the next meeting? Is that possible?
Oh, that wouldn't,
You'd have to pay for it,
Okay,
and that
okay,
would be new information, I think,
okay.
probably.
Yeah, that would be new.
that would be.
well, could it be a condition that we get a peer review confirming that number as a condition of the permit?
That would be up to you guys. I don't think it would.
Well, we also talked about water monitoring and geotechnical reports. Now, those are gonna be conditions as well. We're gonna have pre-construction monitoring and then post. Is that something we can impose upon them in terms of their reports and peer reviewing those reports?
Yeah, we can impose those on them.
And that the geotech would have to be signed off by a professional engineer that what they're proposing is safe.
Yeah, I think that goes back into conservation, and probably, if we can leave it there, and they're probably in a better position to evaluate that than we would be. But I'm not sure how we bifurcate who gets what, who decides what. Certainly, I'd rather see them do it than us. It'd certainly be more cost-effective for everybody.
Yeah.
I think,
I'd still like to see it as a
I think we
condition.
have jurisdiction for it under what we're allowed to look at for site plan review, so I think we should include it. If it's redundant with conservation and what the state comes back with, then it's redundant,
Okay?
my feeling.
Is there anything else we haven't hit, folks?
Question, our next meeting, are we going to be hit, is that when we're going to be reviewing all the amendments?
Yes. Yeah, you're getting busy now.
We haven't been busy?
Yeah, we got a lot to do.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, essentially, we're gonna have to vote on this next meeting. So we'll put together, I'll work with you, Paul, and we'll put together,
Get a draft together and,
I think the 50 was about shade. Because that's what.
so just, I know you all do this anyways, but just make sure that you
There
review.
wasn't a number.
We'll send it, Paul will send it out beforehand, just make sure you review and have any questions or changes beforehand.
So just for clarity, we're going to vote on this site plan with conditions or not, and then also special permit. We're voting on a special permit or not?
Special permit related to floodplain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because as it is now, the building's in the floodplain, so we have to look at what we've got.
Amy, are you going to be available for those meetings?
What dates?
What are the-
October 1st and
I
October.
thought Joe couldn't make it. Are we changing them because of Joe or no?
No.
I thought we were. No?
We originally had October 2nd, but
We said
out
no.
of deference to you, but you don't need,
Right.
but I can't make the 15th. I'm away. So that's why we had originally scheduled for the 22nd. And Paul sent me an email about the 15th.
I have it on my calendar for the 22nd, if that helps you.
Yeah, what did
was.
It
What
was
did
a
we,
discussion last meeting.
Yeah, is that,
Well, well, the issue is
I think we kept it on the 22nd at the last meeting.
is there a town meeting? When is the town meeting?
21st.
Yeah, so we were
So you
trying
wanted
to
a
do
sec-
two of them before
The
town meeting, which is why we talked about moving it up.
Okay. And you moved
Oh,
it
yeah.
to the 15th? Let me just check on the 15th.
That was a discussion, Joe. I think we would remembered that you weren't sure about the 15th,
But
but we also had the thought process of, are we only going to get one meeting to look at these
All the articles.
articles before they have to go to the town?
And
So
then
that
knowing
was-
what happened the last time, where we changed language. And that
Yeah.
caused it to be a little bit troublesome at town meeting.
A little bit.
Yeah. Because you weren't here, we weren't quite sure whether it was you weren't sure or you couldn't make it.
No,
Yeah.
I'm definitely away on the Columbus Day weekend and a couple days beyond.
Well, there's that Thursday, the 17th. The ZBA meets 7 o'clock, meets on that Wednesday, the 16th. I mean, I guess conceivably, they could both meet, and you could both meet at the same time.
Was there one of those meetings we had to get together with the Charter Commission?
That's not till November.
That's
Warren.
November,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Good call, though.
yep. We booted that to November.
Yeah. I don't see anything from me that's a problem on Thursday, the 17th,
Are you available then, Joe?
Yep.
other than it, yeah,
Can't find my other-
other than us rescheduling the meeting again. Did we continue anything to that meeting?
We did,
Did we?
yeah.
We can,
Cumberland
continued-
Farms was November.
yeah, we continued Cumberland
November,
Farms
that's
to
right.
November. think that-
I'm just asking to,
I don't think
Ask it.
anything's
Oh, that's good, yeah.
continued.
Nothing's coming to mind, because I think the things that we've continued most recently was Cumberland Farms. I think we wrapped
That's a-
everything else up.
Only other item open.
okay.
We're meeting the 1st, though, right?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So we can
First.
vote on the 1st.
Right. But we still want to be able to look at the decision on this.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go through the articles for town meeting, so,
I'm glad we have the library.
Yeah.
so the 17th, is that what we're thinking?
17th, okay.
October 17th.
Is everybody okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's instead of the 22nd,
Or the 15th, right?
or the,
Correct.
yeah.
Just to make sure I'm on the right date.
At a time, a place to be determined.
I'm going to shoot for the library.
On October 17th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
What
but-
about on the 1st? Will you be discussing this on the 1st, or just doing the zoning amendments? on
We
the
would
1st?
also be discussing.
We're gonna
this.
discuss this, yeah.
You want us to vote on the first and review the decision on the 17th?
Okay, on the 17th, I will be late. I'm in Chatham until 6.
Okay, well, maybe we can put that, we can discuss the articles first and then
That's the 17th, though.
the 17th, yeah.
Okay, so you're still going to be discussing articles on the 17th, the 1st and the 17th?
We don't know.
More than likely, yeah.
Got it, okay.
And the 22nd is still scheduled, or?
No.
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 Okay.
I mean, you can come if you want to, Joe.
All right, just to make up for my absence.
Okay, that's that. Paul, do we have the information on the amendments that are being proposed? Is there further information we have to get from you, or is that? or is it-
I've sent it out to you.
So hold on, if we're done with this discussion, we can get Scott back in here to discuss those. Are we all done with the discussion for tonight?
Actually, we ought to confirm those dates with Scott. Well, he's not.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to continue the discussion on the remand for SP 488 to October 1st. We don't need to vote, do we? Oh,
Do we need to?
No, it's
No,
not.
okay, all right, good.
okay, so now, Scott, you can go back. I didn't forget about you, I promise.
Incredible.
Is that 17th date good for you? Okay.
Okay. So to get you up to speed, are you okay with those dates? Okay. Well, that's about it. You didn't miss. I'm sorry, Orin, you had a question about,
No, I just wanted to know, do we wait for do those amendments appear in the warrant, or we have to review them, comment them, then they get into the warrant?
You're going to want to, they're on the link, and in fact, the public has it too. If you go to the planning board website or the planning and economic development page, you click on it, it's going to take you right here. So you have everything here. So all of these are a go, as far as we're concerned. So you'll have, on October 1st to review all of them, make your comments, and then ultimately you'll need to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and then Steve will have to present the recommendations at or someone will have to present at town meeting, the recommendations on all the articles.
Now, the amendments that you proposed, that's a different procedure? Does that get into do we approve that as well? And that goes
Yes.
into the warrants?
Yes. And we have one, it's a series of bylaw proposals, changes to definitions and the use table. Or I should say mostly additions to definitions and adding those to the use table. There's a couple other things in there, but
And those are some of the ones that you had worked on with the building inspector? I
yeah,
think.
quite a few of them. And in fact, tomorrow night, we're presenting some of these to the ZBA, particularly the definition on accessory structure and use, or use and structure, which they deal with a lot. So we'll report back to you at that meeting, whatever recommendations they have.
With the bylaw amendment, as it relates to Zone 3, can we or will we have anybody to help us walk through the impact of Zone 3 and what that might be? Either a peer reviewer or even Jennifer or somebody to identify what considerations we need to look at in looking at that kind of proposal?
We can. I've asked. I sent these out to staff to review, and including the water superintendent. Had a note to him that you expect that the planning board will want to hear from you on this, on these changes. So again, this came from a petitioner, not from the town. So I haven't begun reviewing it yet, but we will have a review for you, and I'll collaborate with the water superintendent, and if other people have comments, other staff have comments on it.
Okay.
So how does that work? Did they have to get like 200 signatures to put the article in front of the town for consideration for the warrant, or?
Not that many.
Right, it's not that many,
No.
and this, the
100?
town manager has to verify or confirm it, or
The clerk, right?
the clerk, I'm sorry.
clerk.
Verify signatures, just like us.
You have
25?
the
It's
entire,
not that many.
50, yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
200.
It's not a lot, it's either 25 or 50.
It's usually 100 for annual and 200 for special.
So-
It's 100, to call the election, call the
Special
special
election.
is 200.
Yeah.
Once it's open, it's 100 for an annual, for a special, it's only 10 for an annual.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
Okay.
10, right?
right.
Yeah.
For an annual,
What are you guys on? Annual or this is a special,
this is
This
special.
is
sure.
Special, yeah.
so they would need,
Although
No,
the
this is
selectmen
annual.
can put it on
oh, they
just
put
out of-
this, oh, okay.
Yeah, this
So
is
It's
annual.
a regularly scheduled meeting?
Yeah, it's just the annual the fall town meeting.
This is, yeah, the board did.
Oh, and this is just a petitioned article?
Right.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So did you guys, is this on your 48 Section 5 hearing?
48, Section 5.
Your planning board hearing, is this on it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, that's what they're covering on October 1st.
But don't you have other articles that are sponsored by you guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
And those are all going to be on there?
they're all on there.
Okay, good.
Ours and petitions.
Well, we have an overlay map that shows all of the Zone 3 areas around the town.
I'm going to do what I can to get it.
Okay.
I know we had something
Yeah, we have
that
those
showed a
maps.
lot of it in one of, something I saw.
Farms one?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the property owner that
Yeah.
submitted it.
Okay.
Yeah, because my sense is that, maybe some of the petitioners are in support of this particular lot, being reclassified or, as far as
Right.
removed from the wetlands bylaws, but if they were more aware of all the other potential lots that would fall into the same change in the bylaw, then that's important for everybody to know,
Right.
Yeah, because
Supposed
it's
to
not,
read before you sign something.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure that to get the petition it, they didn't have to provide that, but I'm
They had to
just saying that
convince
to
whoever
vote
they
on
wanted
it.
to get to sign.
Here it is, a minimum of 10 signatures is required for an annual town meeting article.
Yeah.
I know when I was
Well,
getting signatures
I thought
to
it was
run
more.
for the board, I had people giving me 20 questions about how I felt about different issues, so.
No,
I assume they
I'm-
had the same thing.
Yeah.
That's all they need is 10, huh?
yep.
Geez, that's almost not many more than getting the planning board to support you.
But this isn't an annual town meeting.
It
Yes.
is.
It
Yes,
is
it
fall.
is.
We have a
It is.
spring and a fall.
Yeah, we
I
have
thought you said
two.
it was special.
Oh, no,
No, we
we
thought
have
it was,
two.
yeah.
Okay.
No.
There may be a special, there was one that
Every
was
meeting
called,
is
but this is
special.
not.
We did have they did call a special meeting, but then I think it got
Canceled.
canceled.
Got it.
But I mean, this is our normal fall town meeting, so.
So we'll go through these on the 1st and more than likely the 17th as well.
Has the town clerk confirmed the signatures yet?
I would assume so. They gave me the go order, so.
Okay.
But we'll do our best to get all relevant information to you on particularly this one, and then there was the rezoning application that Henry Souza talked about. So I'm
Did
going to try to
too,
find
right?
the previous rezoning when it went to commercial, give you some historical there too.
Well,
so.
mainly for the town meeting vote, because every article, sometimes, you have handouts to supplement.
Yeah.
so people know what they're voting on, and if
Right.
we could have an overlay map of the Zone 3 areas that would be changed under this article for the town meeting, that's, I think, really important. If it's
Right.
at all possible.
I agree, yeah.
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 This could have a substantial impact to a number of people.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially, because it has to be a commercially zoned or industrial zone, and there aren't any industrial in, well, I have to look at that. I mean, it's the village commercial area along 123, I think.
Yeah, and we have to
Anyway,
look at
we'll,
the wording of the petition too, though.
no,
We should probably
No.
not be discussing it.
okay,
Okay.
but, right,
Okay.
we will do our best.
So we will discuss all these on the 1st, and if there's any other business from the board,
Just to confirm the dates on the first,
the 1st and the 17th,
no longer than 50.
no longer the 15th,
Or the 22nd.
or the 22nd. Okay.
Join
and-
1 second of the live.
Before we,
Still not a quorum.
before we run out, I just want to reiterate what I said at the beginning is, as much as I appreciate getting mail that isn't a bill, I don't think that it's appropriate in any fashion to be sending board members things at their personal homes that should be sent to Paul. So please don't do that. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.